Hello everyone, tuning in live or watching this later on YouTube. I'm Gray Prescott, and I'm an account manager at West Coast Robotics, and it's my honor to welcome you all to our Learn with West Coast Robotics event on bedding. And we're coming to you live today, once again from Cowork Chilliwack. It's another beautiful sunny day in the Fraser Valley, and we appreciate you choosing to spend your time with us. It also happens to be Earth Day today, so I think that we're covering a pretty pertinent topic. At West Coast Robotics, we have the privilege and responsibility of being involved in the design of many new barns and many improvement projects on existing barns. One of the first questions that we always ask is, what type of bedding the farmer thinks will work best on their farm? If they are looking for advice on what would be the best for their cows, we're happy to provide information on all the options. One bedding does not fit all management styles. What does bedding day look like on your farm? Does it happen every 3 days or once every 2 weeks? Does it involve light but dusty sawdust or heavy and abrasive sand? Do you use new purchased bedding, or are you recovering your bedding? After the bedding type is decided for a barn and the decision on whether to recover bedding or not, the stall platforms and manure system can be designed to best suit the cows who will live there and the farmer who is responsible for their well-being. The golden rule of manure system design is, what goes in must come out. For the manure system, this means that bedding, wash water, drinking water, and all feed that goes into your barn ends up in long-term storage, minus whatever bedding is recovered, and of course the milk that goes into the tank. The manure slurry on the floor of your barn can range anywhere from a wet, almost liquid manure with sand in it to a hard, dry manure with wood shavings in it. And there's specialized equipment to work effectively with the manure that your barn produces. During this event, my colleagues Mitch McCormick and Denis Langlois and myself will be covering the whats and the whys of various bedding options and how they can be used to manage bedding usage and stall grooming on your farm. You'll see informative presentations and videos about mattresses, water beds, and deep-bedded sand. To close the show, we will be holding a roundtable discussion to consolidate our thoughts, as well as talk about some farmer questions that have come on to us through social media. Below this video stream, we will have links to some of the resources and studies that you're going to see in the talks. There is also a short online poll that we are using to gather information on what our local farmers are dealing with when it comes to bedding, and your replies will be put into a draw to win some great free swag from our vendors. And now, to start things off and talk to you about our first bedding options, I'd like to welcome Milky Mitch McCormick to talk to us about Huber mattresses.
Right on. Thanks, Gray. Before I get into the talk on mats, I do want to point out today is April 22nd, which is Earth Day. I want to make a shout out to all our Canadian dairy farmers. Since 2011, Canadian dairy farmers have been a leader in sustainable dairy farming globally. They have cut their carbon footprint by 7%, lowered their land use by 11%, and reduced water consumption by 6%. So that's something to be really proud of. Huber mats, well, they know cows. The Huber name stands for nearly 100-year tradition in which rubber processing has always been a central theme. Huber is very proud to say that to this day, all their products are German-made. Their family-owned enterprise, Huber Technik, produces exclusively in their factories in Erding, Germany. The product design is also carried out at the Upper Bavarian location in consultation and cooperation with their worldwide dealer network. They absolutely understand their manufacturing business and see themselves as craftspeople, which guarantees their customers a quick response to individual needs and wishes without losing sight of the long-term family tradition. Currently, the third and fourth generation of owners are responsible for managing Huber Technics today. The folks at Huber feel this connects them to the roots of the dairy industry, as they have known and have thrived in a family-owned and operated business for over 100 years. Cows are keen on Huber because Huber mats are made on more than 40 steam-heated hydraulic presses, and they are delivered in roll form. So West Coast Robotics can deliver this product in one piece up to a length of 100 meters. So for farmers, this means mats are very, very easy to install. Put down the roll it out, screw it tight. Huber Technic rubber mats have absolutely no seams, less wear and tear and soil on individual mats or interlocking mats. Great way to go. Huber mats are exclusively made of new unvulcanized tire compounds. They contain high quality raw material that provide, among other things, aging resistance and ozone protection. Huber mats are manufactured with proven Huber quality materials and not diluted. Low-priced natural rubber compounds do not contain these stabilizers. Exposed to light and air, they can therefore become brittle and break and crack. Stable mats made of natural rubber often contain chalk as a filler to reduce costs. Huber processes only 100% new rubber and does not use scrap granules. Vulcanized rubber, in contrast to commercially available plastics, cannot be remelted and repressed. It can only be mechanically chopped up with a high energy input. The granules then only have low cohesion, as Huber only processes high quality raw materials. Huber mats consist of composite foam sheets, either 30 or 40 millimeters thick, that are already wrapped in a plastic film by the producer. This creates perfect deflection for consistent heavy loads from a dairy cow, keeps the shape of the base for many years, and protects the foam mattress from moisture both before and after installation. Giving farmers peace of mind with their 10-year warranty on both the rubber top cover and the foam base. Huber mats offer a complete soft bedding solution without the reoccurring costs of sawdust and wood shavings. The return on investment is significant and quick, as mats drastically reduce the consumption of consumable bedding materials in comparison to deep bedded stalls. Less sawdust to worry about means less time spent bedding and cleaning stalls. Less sawdust means more manure storage in your pit and less sawdust on your land. Mattresses also mean less standard maintenance costs on your new Lely A5 robot. In comparison to sand, there is approximately $500 per robot per year in maintenance savings. No sand or minimal sawdust means less wear and tear on all other farming equipment. Let's talk a little bit about the cows. So the joint health of your cow is of great concern to West Coast Robotics and to Huber. Extreme softness does not automatically provide for healthy joints. The Huber coverings have different levels of studs on the underside that have a dimpling or have a deadening roll or a pimpling effect. This means more comfort for the cow. Once again, giving farmers peace of mind that Huber recognizes the importance of cow health and putting milk in the tank. Huber's years of experience show that stall mats made from high-quality new rubber do not have to be very thick to offer elasticity, comfort, and resistance. Their fabric insert reinforces and stabilizes the coverings and reduces the elasticity of the rubber. External quality control and conformance tests are part of their development and production philosophy. That is why Huber stall mats provide great value to a dairy farm. They are built to last the test of time. And speaking of experience, I'm going to throw it over to Denis Langlois, our FMS specialist, to have a little bit of a discussion on Huber mats and cow comfort.
Thanks, Mitch. Great presentation regarding the what Huber mats are and can do. I will cover more of the cow side of bedding rather than the material side of it. Like I said, Mitch already did a great job at it. So one thing I would start with is I understand there's economics and practical side to the decision of which bedding we are going to choose, but let's remember also why we spend money and time on grooming and finding the perfect bedding. We certainly don't do it so our barn looks good. We don't do it to have a giant sleepover. So why do we spend that time and money? We do it so the cows can lay down. And if we are not achieving this singular goal, then most likely we either didn't choose the right one, or we are not adapting our management and day-to-day practices to the bedding we chose. So I want to start here before I go more into the Huber mats here is time budget for a cow. And probably a lot of you have seen this before, if not all of you. But here's an example of what a cow will go through, or what her time is going to look like throughout a day. We can expect about 1.5 hours of lockup, including milking. We can expect also 1.6 hours of standing, probably getting her hair done under a Luna brush to get her ready for a hot COVID Zoom date, or 0.4 hours also for drinking water, 3 hours out of the pen, and 5.5 hours of eating time. The majority of our day, or for that matter, half of the day, at least half of the day is what we hope for, will be lying down in that stall. And also of which that 12 hours she'll spend about 9.6 hours, for rumination. So it's very critical that we get that cow to lay down, and to lay down into something that's comfortable and is going to keep her healthy. So lame cows typically lie down for, I'm going to transition into this table here that you see, frequency of lying times for non-lame cows and lame cows. So lame cows typically lie down for longer bouts, and the pain associated with the process of rising leads to increased time spent standing in the stall between lying bouts. When we compare the behavior of lame cows to non-lame cows, lame cows have higher frequency of very short lying times and very long lying times compared to non-lame cows. So I want to focus on the two ends of the table that you saw there. So it's very critical, again, to have good management practice in terms of hoof health, because that's going to impact how much she uses that bedding that we spent a lot of money on. In other terms, lame cows won't have regular lying bouts and very likely will stand for too long. So having, again, the right type of bedding is going to help reduce lameness, but I'd say it can also hide management gaps. So combining the right bedding type with the right hoof health management is going to be very important. I want to show here, take the time to show a blown out mattress. I'm sure a lot of you, again, have seen this either in farms you've visited or maybe even on your farm. This is a clean one, but I'm sure, again, you've seen some pretty similar things either on your barn or other barns. This typically doesn't happen within a day. It slowly drifts into this and then becomes something we walk by and forget the impact that it has on the cow's health and comfort. It becomes something, we're so busy with our day-to-day activities that we walk by, we groom the stalls, but we forget to really think of what this big hole becomes a real nest for bacteria and propagation of mastitis or other pathogens. So I think Huber mats are really good at working with these kinds of problems, but because you can cut and like Mitch said, you can cut and replace any section of different brand or style of old mats that maybe you have in older section of your barn or your young stock barn that you might already have, and you can pretty easily cut it and replace it with a Huber mat in a good section with no seam in it, and make sure the cows lay down in a clean and comfortable environment. So with that, I will invite Mitch back again to discuss the next bedding type.
Right on. Thanks, Denis. So next we're going to get a little bit into DCC water beds. So we'll talk a little bit about the history of water beds as well. So in 1999, water beds for cows were introduced to the North American market from Europe. Originally, the single chamber bed was the first product introduced. However, it needed some minor tweaks and improvements. And then in 2003, a patent for a dual chamber cow water bed was secured and introduced to the North American market. The original dual chamber water bed had a baffle between the front and rear pillows, allowing water to slowly pass through between the chambers, providing good stability and comfort where it was needed in that moment. However, in 2013, DCC waterbed ISO was introduced as the third generation waterbed, and really their most comfortable bedding solution yet. The front and rear chambers of the ISO are filled completely separately. The front pillow provides a consistent cushion for the knees, and the rear pillow floats the hocks and the udder for more consistency and better circulation. With a fixed volume of water, waterbed ISOs support the cow's body weight through hydraulic pressure, so mirroring the cow and floating her pressure points depending on how she's moving about in the stall. Waterbeds are manufactured and tested using strict quality control standards. Installation is not at all complicated. DCC waterbeds arrive in a roll of individual beds. And to install, the beds are unrolled in a long strip of beds and aligned with the platform, so one DCC water bed is in each stall. The ends of each run and the front of each bed are then anchored to the concrete with stainless steel and aluminum hardware. Next, the bed is filled with tap water and sealed with a 3-part stainless steel closure. Finally, a brisket locator is installed along the front of the bed to help with alignment in the freestall. Water beds have been successfully fitted from us as well in newly built, brand new builds, brand new barns, and then of course in renovated both freestall and tie stall barns as well. So proper fit though is extremely important. So working closely with the West Coast Robotics team is key to ensuring maximum comfort and proper performance of the product itself. Water beds are durable and last the test of time. As they are filled with water, they have the same level of comfort 15 years from now as they do the day you put them in. We joked a little bit about this before. As a child of the 80s, I myself at one point had a water bed, and I can certainly say that I'm sure that water bed would be as comfortable today as it was then, just because of how it's built, as opposed to a mattress which will consistently break down over time. So let's talk a little bit about why waterbeds. Well, there's a lot of really great reasons to put waterbeds in your facility. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about hawk protection. So on par with sand bedding, DCC waterbeds protect the hawks. Ask any producer with waterbeds or look at the research. DCC waterbeds protect the hawks at a level on par with sand bedding. So we're going to look at this graph here that we've got up. So a percentage of cows with hawk sores of 0 or 1. And now you can see a 97.5% on sand with DCC right very close at 94.6, which is a considerable difference from other products available on the market. So this is a really positive thing. DCC waterbeds float the cow's pressure points and promote strong circulation to the udder and legs and ensure consistent comfort every day, every minute. So the bottom line is, as Denise said before, lame cows lay down less and tired cows produce less milk. And at the end of the day, this is all about putting more milk in the tank. Speaking of milk, let's talk a little bit about the quality of that milk. So keeping somatic cell count down. It's very important. Connecting milk production with bedding type can be difficult as herds all produce at different levels based on their age, nutrition, genetics, and a whole slew of other factors. What we do know is that the rubber surface of the DCC waterbed, without a doubt, helps prevent the growth of bacteria. So if we look at the somatic cell count here, we see waterbeds, although really in this graph, it's a very small percentage difference when you look at the count numbers, but we do see waterbeds coming out on top as producing good quality milk. So this leads to reduced mastitis rates and consistent low somatic cell. And low mastitis, low somatic cell indicate high quality milk and premiums that the farmer and their consumers can count on. Culling voluntarily means farmers have more control over what's going on with their herd. Water beds, combined with healthy cows, as evidence demonstrated by low cull rates, as well as more than 3+ lactation cows than rubber-filled mattresses and sand in this study. So low cull rates mean farmers have more control over their herd, and they get to decide when a cow is done providing milk. So the longer you can keep a mature cow healthy, the stronger your milk production will be, and the more efficient your farm will run. And this kind of jumps right into, obviously, keeping cows healthy longer. So very important. So a strong indicator that a herd is at peak health can be pared down to one metric, and that's age. So a herd of mature cows, we're going to say 4+ lactations for this graph, means more milk, more profit, and really truly indicates great herd health. And so we look at this, older cows, they tend to last longer on water beds, and I think that speaks greatly to the level of comfort that they have within their stalls. They're more rested, they're healthier, they're more comfortable, and they produce milk longer, and that's what we're looking for. So producers with water beds really have the choice to cull cows when they want to and not because they have to. And certainly, last but not least, we need to talk a little bit about the heat. With spring finally arriving here in British Columbia, we look ahead to another great growing year and a bountiful harvest for all our farmers in British Columbia. But it's important not to forget about the impact that the heat has on cows. The summer heat is obviously right around the corner. You add in the BC humidity, and it gets very uncomfortable very quickly, especially for the cows in the barn. No one can hide from the heat. Cows don't always deal with heat in the barn environment very well on those long, hot summer days. And this can have negative impact on putting milk in the tank. So farmers go to great lengths to protect the animals from the heat, everything from misters to cool down, fans to create air movement, allowing for fresher, cooler air. Water availability is obviously very important. All these things help to reduce heat stress. However, we don't always hear farmers talk about the impact that their bedding has on controlling the temperature of their cows. So studies show that DCC water beds can be up to 10 degrees cooler than most styles of bedding, particularly in hot weather. And because temperature transfers from hot to cold, if your bedding is hotter than your cow, well, that means she is heating up in the stall. Research shows that physiological changes in cows can include everything from increased respiratory rates, panting, sweating, reduced milk quality and yield, and changes in reproductive performance. So to combat the heat, you may see cows change their heat and drinking patterns. You will likely see them standing more to better radiate their body heat, and if they are seeking shade in the barn, then they will crowd. So during these summer months, there's absolutely no question that water beds will undoubtedly have a positive impact on your cows and their, as well as your heat management system. So we just want to say all the data points that I've shown here in regards to water beds have been collected from the Journal of Dairy Science. The noted authors were Dr. Temple Grandin, Dr. Wendy Fullwider, and Colorado State University. So water beds are an excellent fit for any barn. And whether you're retrofitting your existing facility or whether you're building something new, water beds are without a doubt a great option for any dairyman and certainly something that we at West Coast Robotics think very, very highly of. Cow comfort is an important part of maximizing cow health and in turn putting milk in the tank. I'd like to welcome back Denis to talk a little bit more about cow comfort and impact that water beds have on the cows. Denis.
Thanks again, Mitch. I think I should get you to join the FMS team. Mitch did a great job and covered most of what would impact cow and when we're using water beds. To further expand on what Mitch talked about, bringing up here to further expand the 2007 study that Mitch mentioned, I'd like to point out that compost had a 100% lesion score 0 to 1, and rubber-filled mat had 83% score 0 to 1, which is also really good, with 28.4% being at 0. And water beds, for that matter, like Mitch mentioned, had 94.6% of 0 to 1 lesion score, with 64.8 being at 0, and Sen had 97.5% 0 to 1, with 75% of it at 0. So I think when we're looking at those studies, it's good to dig in a little bit further. And the other thing to point out, too, being a 2007 study, the latest development or update in the design of DCC waterbed was done in 2013. I personally don't know or have seen a relevant new research in terms of beddings and different types of stall surface. So it would be great to see some new studies being done in terms of different type of bedding and how it impacts the cow, because there's a lot of development that's been done in terms of innovations in the bedding type, not only the bedding type, but also in terms of manure management, and also the skills and expertise that surround everything that relates to bedding. So I want to show here is also water beds, which probably, again, most of you have seen before, and I've been in farms that are using water beds. The design of water beds being more like a bubble rather than a square fill box with water on a flat surface, for that matter, makes it so that obviously milk and urine will quickly drain away from where the cow is lying, her udder and her teats, therefore lower chances of spreading any types of pathogens. So that's a big plus side for DCC water beds. And speaking of which as well, I think I want to mention that I do weekly milk quality that we track from all the farms that we work with, and I honestly can't remember cows. So the herds that spike higher in somatic cell count, I try to follow up on them, but I honestly can't remember really the last time I had one pop up that was on DCC waterbeds. So I think that speaks volumes. So continuing on, the dual chamber is critical to adapting the pressure points to the right leg and hoof, as Mitch mentioned, especially as the cow gets up and lays down. As the cow gets to her knees, we make sure we keep the right amount of weight and force absorption through water displacement, but also the right amount of support to keep it comfortable as she's doing those tasks. And as the cow gets to her back hooves, we make sure again that the pressure points are transferred to there to keep traction. And the great thing with water, as Mitch mentioned, is the density doesn't change over time, so the comfort doesn't change either. And that really is a big positive for DCC waterbeds. As we'll talk about, Sen, if your management practices are not adapted to it and you let sand go down to low to concrete, well then it won't be better than other types of bedding. So again, management adaptation is key to the type of bedding that you have. So with that, I will throw it back to Gray to get started on sand.
Yeah, now we come to the portion of the event that I know many of you have been waiting for, sand bedding. When West Coast Robotics is approached by somebody for a design of a system to work with sand bedding, we always go to the farm and gather information to see what we have to work with. Typically, we'll return with a detailed drawing and a quote, and will appear to be very experienced and wise in manure equipment, and it's obvious that we have the confidence to stand behind the design that we're showing. So how does a sales rep born in 1987 put together a design that's on a level with someone who's been selling equipment, manure equipment, since 1987? Well, you're about to find out. At West Coast Robotics, we have a great relationship with Valmetal Group, and they've been an excellent supplier, and they stand behind us every step of the way. Ralph Fanning has been an advisor to us on any time we're dealing with something new or complicated. And he's personally helped me out in many designs to work with sand that have turned out to produce a very good system for the customer. I've always been impressed with Ralph's ability to communicate what can be a pretty technical and challenging topic in a way that's enjoyable and easy to digest. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to the video, and I hope that you all enjoy getting to see a little bit of who we go to when we want to talk to an expert on manure equipment.
Hi, I'll introduce myself. My name is Ralph Fanning. I've been with Jamesway Farm Equipment since 1987, working in feed handling and manure. And West Coast Robotics people asked me to speak a little bit today on the subject of manure systems for sand bedding. So first, a little bit about our company. It is now a division of Valmetal, and we're rebranding our equipment in 2021 as we speak, from the red Jamesway equipment you're familiar with to orange under the Valmetal brand. And that's because it's a large company in many divisions, everything from feed storage and feed processing is a big part of what we do, feed mixers, feed delivery systems, and in the manure side of things, manure collection and transfer equipment, manure processing, and application equipment. So it's really a complete circle around the cow, as you see there, for all the things related to feed and manure. We also have a division based in California specialized in wastewater treatment and is also on large scale agriculture. The photo there is a water scrubbing system for a pistachio plant, I believe, actually. But we're here today to talk about sand bedding, and sand bedding has some pros and cons, of course. The pros, it's excellent comfort for the animal. You'd like lying on the beach just like she is right now. And it also produces excellent floor traction in the alleyways, just the way sand, the grit that's left on the floor. There's the argument also that it's an inert bedding. It won't support bacterial growth, which of course is true if you have pure sand. And that's pretty critical to have very, very clean sand. And in all cases, it requires extremely good stall maintenance, no matter whether it's sand or other types of bedding. If there's leaked milk or manure that's left in the back of the stall, of course, it's going to propagate bacteria, nothing new. But there seems to be sometimes a perception that changing to sand bedding means you can do less stall maintenance, and that's certainly not the case. So what are the problems with sand bedding? Well, one big problem is it's extremely abrasive. It's very bad for equipment. So my old saying, of course, sand bedding is good for the cow, and it's good for me as an equipment salesperson. So I hope you're going to be happy too. But really, there's a long way there's been a lot of progress in making this less problematic. We're very familiar with wear parts in sand bedding in many applications, tillage, excavation, etc. So it requires special construction, and it also requires cooperation from the farm. Best practices reduce the amount of sand going into the manure system. We have farms that are using in excess of 80 pounds per cow per day, and many that are down at 30 pounds per cow per day. You can be sure the equipment will last much, much longer when there's a lower content of sand, of course. So the little cutaways on the right-hand side here, you see a conventional curb at the back of a stall that's filled up with sand. And the problem with this is we have a brisket board. We want her hanging over the stall a bit so that manure falls in the alley. The problem is this is not comfortable to her, so she's not going to like that. She'll creep forward into the stall, or she'll have a sore hip. So the tendency to protect against that is we fill the stall up much more full, and that gives her a nice comfortable bed like we see here. The problem, of course, with that on bedding day, there is a huge amount of sand that goes out into the alleys. So if the construction is made with a sand curb, which is gently sloped on the inside, and we fill up barely level to it, if her hip lies on this gentle slope, it doesn't bother her. In fact, she's quite shaped that way. So a sand curb will reduce the amount of kick out in the first day an enormous amount. Also, when you're placing sand, if it's placed too much at the back, when you add sand, it needs to be distributed a bit. If you have a hummock back here, they will paw around and put a lot more sand out into the alleyway again. This is a significant problem that systems that work well several days of the week may fail on sand day, stall filling day sometimes. So our first job in a manure system is to collect up the manure. Of course, there's lots of choices, flush systems or tractor scrape, etc. But the use of robots has changed a lot of thinking. And not only is it impossible to drive through with tractors in a barn that's populated all the time, there's a recognition that your time is not free. In fact, it is your most valuable resource. And spending time chasing manure down alleys is not a good investment of your time. And hiring people to do it is extremely difficult today. So automated scrapers are pretty much the norm. They work very well. They're simple, they're reasonably low cost investment, and they have a very low operating cost. So once we've gathered up the manure, what we've received is coming out of the cow at 11–12% dry matter or solids content, and is semi-solid. So we have to decide from here, what are we going to do with this manure, which has sand in it and organics and all these things. And we have a basic choice. We're going to handle it from here on as a semi-solid, or we're going to liquefy it and handle it as a liquid. This in the picture is, we call a test disc, a 24-inch circle. You set it up on something, it's on a 5-gallon pail here. You grab another pail, get a manure sample. You pour it all over the disc and you wait 1 minute. And you let it all drip off as much as it wants. After 1 minute, you measure at the middle, and this is now our slump score, which looks to be 3 inches on this. So that's a semi-solid manure. When you're in a manure that will go through a vertical electric pump, the score would be 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch typically. So to separate the sand out of the manure, now we need the opposite. We need to be working with water. We want to separate the sand and the manure. So we can choose to collect this as a semi-solid and liquefy it here, but in most cases we're going to liquefy it in the cross gutter, and then we will take the sand out and send the rest off to storage. So the collection system most typically is called a flume, an underfloor pipe or trench. Trenches are better in sand, by the way. If you ever had a problem, you have access to clean out a problem. But we drop manure into this pipe by the alley scraper system, and a pump brings liquid and shoots it down the line and flushes like a toilet. And we bring this all back to a reception pit. From there, we can decide what we're going to do, send it to storage or separate sand. And there's some rules about cleaning this out. We're going to need a lot of flow, and the amount of flow will depend on the type of sand you have, the width of the barn, and the water content. But pretty typical, a round flume like this is around 40 horsepower. If you're really horsepower challenged, you can build a much more expensive flume pipe, a V-trench. It's very difficult to build, but it will work with lower flow rates. So be prepared, you're going to need large motors for flume systems. Most typically, depending on elevations, we'll either have to collect that into a reception pit and then elevate it, or preferably we could come straight out of the barn into something called a sand lane. And a sand lane is a, well, it's exactly that. It's a laneway that has a very specific slope, and our job here is to slow down the flow. And we want to slow it down specifically to the speed at which all the sand will start falling out of the water, but the organics will not. And this is very important. If we are too slow in the lane, we don't have enough flow, we don't have the right slope, we don't have the right consistency of manure, the organics will stick in the sand, and that's not good. We want clean sand. So velocity is everything. That has to do with design and matching pumps, and also to do with the amount of water. And that requires some management that we don't have time to go into, but we're going to recirculate the same water multiple times, and we're going to need to refresh it from one source or another. Of course, we use milkhouse water. Maybe that's enough in some cases, but usually we need to get some other refresh water into this system. In any case, this is the whole principle. It's a 1/4% slope, and we set up the width to agree with your flow rates and your tractor bucket, by the way, and then the length will depend on how much sand we want to accumulate. We need a certain amount of length in order for sand to really slow down and drop out. But then on this operation, is a large operation in California, they clean the sand out once a day or twice a day. In fact, they will have 2 of these sand lanes. They will clean each one once a day. So they have about 12 hours capacity in a 300-foot lane. Well, where you are, that's too big of a lane, and we don't want to probably clean it out every day. So this might be something more typical. I know West Coast has installed a number of sand lanes already, but this is a more reasonable scale operation. The liquid from the flume comes in here, and it's going across, not down the alley, so that it stops. There's usually a deceleration pot here to slow it immediately, so that as we begin flowing down the alley, we're already slow. And you see there's a lot of sand accumulated right here, and as we go down, then we see the liquid. So what happens if I don't clean this out right now, the liquid level is a high thin layer, and it speeds across this and continues dropping sand down in the open area. So it fills progressively from one end to the other. And basically, if you have a sand lane that shows sand 2/3 of the way down, it's time to clean it out, because there's already some sand sneaking over the end. And if you think you can get it 90% full before you clean it out, this is where systems get in trouble. You're putting sand downstream now in places that weren't supposed to have sand. So proper use of a sand lane is super important. This guy has a depression down here. He will occasionally clean this out. There shouldn't be sand in this lane, but it's sized for his skid steer bucket, I see. And he's got a crash bar there so that the skid steer driver can't get to the edge of the reception pit, which is a pretty good idea, I believe. So in these systems, we're going to use an impeller pump. We added a lot of water to get the slump down below half inch. And so what pump do we need? So this is actually a more complex question in sand than in non-sand. Just understand there's a lot of variables in making a pump performance. The impeller diameter, the RPM, the tip speed, all these things are crucial. Tip speed is what develops pressure in a system, which is great if you need pressure. Here we're really chasing volume. We will want large paddles. We'll want efficient style of paddle. And one thing to consider is we're going to want a large diameter inlet on the impeller and large paddles, because we are not working with water, we're working with dairy manure, And as you all know, you will have all kinds of foreign objects in there. You may have a placenta, you may have a hoof block, you may have who knows what. But it's working with very small pumps doesn't work. We offer submersible pumps, we offer small diameter pumps. These are great in liquids, really high speed impellers. They can pump a lot of gallons with a relatively small unit, but they can't take any kind of debris. So we want to focus on a larger impeller diameter and a largish inlet. This chart down here is just interesting to me because it's showing all the pump performances, and this is all on the same pump. All they've done is trimmed the paddles slightly. It's a 1/4 inch trim on each diameter, 1/8 of an inch off each paddle. And what it's telling me, there's a high pressure pump from our wastewater division at 100 feet of head pressure. I could be pumping around 1,000 gallons per minute, and I'd be using around 55 horsepower. If I trimmed that back 4/8, half an inch, I would be delivering around 500, 600 GPM at 40 horsepower. So very small changes make very big differences on these pumps. And we need to make sure the pump you choose is going to match your flow requirements in your flume and your sand lane. If we're using the same pump for transfer to storage, then we have to also worry about distance and pressure. There's one other thing to look at, the housing design. There's a couple choices. This is called a volute. You see that the clearance increases and increases away from the housing as compared to a round housing. This we offer, this is great in thick manure, but this one is more efficient in water-like manure. This is the performance curve for the volute, and this for the round housing. So we're going to get twice as much flow for the same horsepower by targeting the right impeller design. So selecting a pump for sand, we have to worry about the construction features, the use of special steel, how easy to service, how expensive to keep up, and of course the bottom bearing has not a very fun life in sand. So all of our pumps, either standard, our 16-inch pump is standard. Our other pumps, it's optional. You can have standard steel or Hardox 450 construction. So what is Hardox 450? You hear AR steel or abrasion resistant steel. Well, there's many grades of AR steel. We use AR 200 and we use Hardox 450. Hardox 450 is at the limit of what can be bent or curved. Any harder than that, it's approaching tool steel. It will crack. It's extremely difficult to work with. We can't drill a hole. Everything must be plasma or laser. So that's where we stop. If we have to machine it or do other things, we'll use a thicker grade of AR 200. But the pump impellers are all made of Hardox 450. As you can see from the chart, the wearability of Hardox 450 is very, very, very high compared to Hardox 400, which is very high compared to 200 and very high compared, of course, to mild steel. So this is as good as you can get in something that has to be formed or welded. The perimeter of anything we build in Hardox has these indicator notches because once they're painted, they look the same. The Hardox steel is very different when it's not painted, but once they're painted, they all look alike. You can tell by the indications that are in every Hardox part. Ease of service is important. If you're outdoors and you have a telehandler or something around, you can pluck a pump right out of the pit, no problem. If you're indoors, these are no longer an option. We have different levels of kits for removing your pumps. West Coast Robotics people can tell you about that, but it's an important consideration. You will get something jammed in your pump one day and you need it out so you can get running. You can easily lift and service a pump yourself. Or if you have a major service job, the serviceman will spend much less billable hours getting your pump in and out of the pit. So a lift kit is an investment, but you will get paid back, and it's safe. All of our pumps are a bolted modular construction. The inlet plate will wear much sooner than the housing, so it's bolt-on. The housing will wear much sooner than the elbow, so it's bolt-on. The elbow, by the way, is a heavy weld elbow, so it's very, very thick steel. It's a cast or an extruded part, so it's about a 1/2 inch thick of hard steel. The oil bath is a module. This is the bearing area. It's going to need service. Are you going to be down for a week? Or are you going to be down for an hour? It's a module that pops in and out, so you can put your pump back in service and repair the other spare later. Speaking of the bottom bearing, we have 2 versions. This is for a 16-inch pump, and it uses a similar system as this is for the 20-inch electric pump. This is impeller diameters we talk about. There is a stack of seals at each end. At the upper end, we just have a couple of seals. At the bottom end here, we have 6 of them. One is a double lip to keep the oil in. 2 of them are grease seals that are preventing dirt from approaching the oil seal. And these ones are grease seals that are allowing grease pressure to vent outwards. So we're always flushing the outside. And that's the principle of any good bottom bearing in manure. You need to flush the grease through the seals to prevent entry. And this happens to be a very large high horsepower. It's a 250 horsepower unit that we put on the large electric pumps. And the smaller version you saw earlier is a 5 seal. This one is an 8 seal. These have been in use for many, many years. Other thing to consider is the duty cycle. We might have 3 or 4 different models of pumps that could supply your needs, but some are small pumps running fast and some are large pumps running slow. Well, a big strong pump running slow is good. A high capacity pump running few hours, of course, is good. Just so you know, velocity is not our friend in sand. So we will require a certain tip speed in order to produce the pressure we need, but flushing is not a high pressure job. We're better off with a low tip speed and a big paddle to produce the volume we need, and you'll have a lot less wear. Quick bit of info on the 2 series of pumps. The 12 and 16-inch are the same pump, only the impeller, housing, and blade are a different size. And these both feature a 5x5 main beam with a 2 3/4-inch balanced drive line. So it's a tubular drive line, pulley on the top and oil bath on the bottom. Very simple, no mid bearings. It's a 6-inch discharge impeller, 6-inch discharge pipe full length. And in the 12 inches available 10 to 40 horsepower versions or 20 to 40 for the 16-inch. The impeller is the same in all cases. It's only the pulley ratios that change. A small change in speed makes a vast change in flow and horsepower. We would never consider 12-inch in raw dairy manure. For a separated liquid, it's a fine choice. 16-inch is the smallest impeller I would recommend in dairy manure to have the capacity for some amount of, a decent amount of debris to pass, not have constant blocking. The other choice in high volume systems is the 20-inch impeller, and we've stepped up everything here. This is a heavy, heavy pump. It's an 8x8-inch main beam, a 4-inch by 300 horsepower drive line, the same as is used in PDO equipment of ours. It's an 8-inch discharge on the impeller, so it's an 8-inch weld elbow and discharge pipe all the way to the top. And it's offered in 50 and 75 horses standard. There is 100 horse, which requires some discussions about how you're going to bring it in and out for service because of the weight of the motor. But this is the industrial version pump. And I know West Coast Robotics has sold both versions, so you can speak to them if you want to go see one or the other. So that concludes my presentation. Working with sand-laden manure, the system needs to be the right design from the start. And then with the proper equipment selection and construction, you're going to have a satisfactory life. We don't want to overwork equipment or put inappropriate equipment into sand. You'll be a very unhappy owner. So I hope our experience is a little bit of help for you. And thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye.
All right. Thanks, Ralph. Great presentation. Me and Gray were sure glad to model our guns for that picture. I'll let you guys guess which one was which. So Ralph shared a lot of great information, very detailed, and it's only half of a longer presentation, which you can find the link below the live stream here. So if you're keen on finding more information about sand manure management, definitely click the link below after our presentation here and have a look at Ralph's full presentation. Some of the information we're sharing here may not be suitable to all other areas due to the benefits of BC's climate. So here, talking about sand, I'll cover again more the cow side of bedding rather than the material side of it. Here's a table showing data from 205 cows in 16 different freestall facilities on sand bedding. It shows that cows on sand bedding lie down for 20 minutes longer for each lying bout, so 1.3 hours versus 1 hour on mattresses, and take fewer bouts per day. That results so 10 versus 14 than cows on mattresses. Resting behavior of the 205 cows on that study show that it results in 12.7 hours of lying time on sand versus 11.5 on mats. So I think we can achieve the same results on both types of bedding, but it's interesting to see those kinds of studies. Newer mattresses products utilize foam like the Huber mats, water like the DCC waterbed or gel to provide improved cushion over the older mat, and rubber crumb-filled products. In preference studies performed by Roger Palmer at the University of Arlington in 2003 showed that cows prefer to lie in sand stalls and on the more cushioned mattress. I'd like to point out here again that this is from 2003, so the mattresses technology and comfort has improved greatly since then. As you can see on the table here, that's the waterbed, the old waterbed single chamber. So I would definitely see them go up in that table. So updated studies would need to be done, something that maybe is more like within the last 5 years. But on the table, again, if we can bring that up, 69% of the cows chose sand. I believe we have to be careful when we're looking at studies like this because there's also an adaptation period. Given a choice, the cows will obviously choose more stable surface to lie in, but it doesn't necessarily mean she won't lay down as much once she's familiar with the new surface and be just as comfortable. Again, another table here from the University of Wisconsin survey 60 high-producing freestall dairy herds in Wisconsin that showed that the prevalence of swollen hocks in mattress herds was 29% versus compared to 5% in deep loose bedded herds. Deep loose bedding provides more cushion around bony areas and is associated with fewer lame cows, which in turn reduces the risk for severe hock and knee injury. Poorly managed in design, I want to point out that poorly managed in design deep bedded stalls, though, are associated with an increased risk for medial hock injuries caused by the limb hanging, the back legs hanging over the raised rear curb when cow lies diagonally across the stall, and when sand fill is poor in those deep bedded stalls. Stall sizing is critical in all types of bedding. And the Dairyland Initiative's website has great resources if you want to verify your stall. That's another link that's below the live stream here. It has sizing all based on weight of cows, so great resource to look through. So before you invest in a new type of bedding, if you're going to keep the stall base that you have, it's good to go and measure and see if maybe you can make some improvement there before you put in that new type of bedding. I'd like to show a video here just of an example of how management and stall sizing is crucial in any type of bedding because that's gonna determine the success of your chosen bedding type. Here's a video of a cow trying to lie down into a deep bedded stall, so you can see she's hitting her neck on the neck rail, and she's not too comfortable on her right rear leg. And she's taking some time to place herself properly, lunge a bit forward, and finally lie down, which is, we'd like to see the cows lie down and get up with more confidence. So again, here there's critical points there. I think you could see that the bedding was a little bit low, the hoof health maybe needed to be addressed on that cow, and the stall size, the neck rail, needed to be addressed as well. So key points to look at when you're choosing any types of bedding. I wanted to point out, and with that, I want to show another table here. The sand benefits. Again, that's a table coming from the Dairyland initiative. But it shows that on average, comparing sand versus mattresses, it showed that on a rolling herd average, an extra 1,100 kgs of milk, 7 kgs of energy corrected milk, lowers SEC by 13,000, and a 2% reduction in turnover rate. So great benefits that we see from sand bedding. With that, I'd like to show a preview of a little video of Halmer Farms, Adri and Monique Stoit. They've been on sand bedding for a while, and I'd like to point your attention also at the end of the video. You will see a cow standing up, and I'd like you to pay attention to how confident she is when she's standing up.
Welcome to Halmer Farms. My name is Adri Stout. This is my daughter Monique, and I farm with Monique and my son and his girlfriend Andrew and Esther. We are here in beautiful Legacy, and you guys want to ask me about why I have sand bedding and sand lane and stuff. Before I built this barn in 2019 now, it's a couple of years ago already. I had cow mattresses, and I put a little bit of sawdust over top of that. The reason I went with sand this time, I heard good things about it. There's no organic matter growing in sand, and that's one of the main reasons. And the cows are comfortable with it because they can lay however they want to, or whatever. That's the main thing. And of course, there's no organic matter growing in it. The chance of mastitis is supposed to be less, especially in the summertime. That's the main thing. Since when we started, it's over a year ago now, we ordered 1 or 2 loads of sand, and that is more because in the beginning it packs more. We ordered another load after a month, and after that, about 7 months, about 4 or 5 months ago, we ordered another load, and after that we haven't ordered a load yet. So, but the reclamation is pretty good. The cleaning, we're just trying to figure out a little bit yet, but hopefully we got that figured out after a month or whatever. Other than that, we're putting in sand just about every week. We put a little bit in there again, and that's going really good. And one of the reasons too, I still have to order sawdust for the heifer barn and all the stuff. It's about $1,200 a load, and that's about every month, right? So I'm saving about $1,200 for the cows. Would have been the same or more. I save about $1,200 to $1,500 a month on sawdust. I know I can have more cost rebuilding stuff, pumps, because sand wears out more, but I mean, I think still the cost is going to be lower, and especially for mastitis wise too, right? In the other barn, we always had Once every month we had a cow with the splits. And over here, actually, the cows got out. And one did the splits because she was in the feeding alley. But we got her up, put her back in the sawdust pack, and 2 days later she was back in the herd. Because this, like Monique said, they're first way sturdier on their feet, right? And same with heat. You see the heats better. Not that we don't have to see them because they will show up on the computer. But I mean, you see more activity with the cows that way. And other than that, they are really quiet.
Thanks so much to Adri Stoit and his daughter Monique Simpson for sharing their experience with us and allowing us to come onto the farm and get some information from them. We're going to jump into a roundtable discussion right now, and just to share some of our thoughts and sort of some of the discussions that come up through discussions that we have out on farms around the Fraser Valley and in British Columbia. I'm going to start out by asking the question. It's my experience, I quite often see as it pertains to mattresses and water beds, I tend to see farms over sawdust once they get water beds or once they get mattresses. I think the whole purpose of putting in a water bed or a mat is to reduce a consumable product, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
You guys, is this your experience, Gray? Do you see this as well, or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say that the purpose of any bedding medium or bedding mattress is to, first and foremost, make a comfortable place for the cow to rest. That being said, after that, it's how do we do that using as little bedding as possible? How do we do that in a sustainable way? And as I said earlier, what goes into your barn has to come out. So from an equipment perspective, when I see overbedding, I worry that we're putting more bedding into the alley than needs be. That means that our manure system is going to need to get that to storage, and the storage is going to have to be there to handle that. So that's kind of how I see it affecting the manure system. But maybe Denis could speak to whether there's any impact on the cows when you overbed.
I wouldn't say necessarily that there's impact on the cows. It's really more on an economical side and seeing, if you chose the certain type of bedding, whether it's DCC water beds or another types of Huber mats, and the goal was to reduce that usage of shavings or sawdust, then if you're just applying the same amount, then you're obviously not going to see the same benefits. So in terms of a cow health, I don't think it necessarily has negative or extra benefits to over applying it on a good bed. So yeah, I think it's definitely more on economical side.
Right on. Guys, I think one of the questions that probably that we should really talk about and have a look at is when we look at something like sand bedding, how does sand bedding or sand in the barn impact the relationship with the robot? Gray, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, this is where I should say, well, it depends on the robot, but there is a very real increased cost with operating any machine in sand as opposed to not. As Ralph alluded to in his talk about the manure equipment, which is probably where sand manifests itself most, is you're dealing with an abrasive fluid. So anywhere steel meets sand, wear is going to happen. It's real and you should plan for it. So with the Lely robot, by virtue of the robot arm design, our mothership, which hangs out below the cow during a milking process, actually has very few moving parts on it. All the major cylinders that control that arm movement are high and dry further up on the arm. So it's really the ropes that hold that that tether actually the teat cups to the mothership. They get changed out for a stainless steel chain. The rollers that those ropes typically run on get changed for a stainless steel roller. And then we change those parts out as part of our routine maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the big piece with this also, it really comes down to, and Denis talked a lot about it, about being, watching your management style. And I think that's really what it comes down to. At the end of the day, it's really important that dairymen, when on sand, take a much more proactive approach to their maintenance as opposed to a reactive approach, where usually by that time you've probably already got a significant problem that needs to be dealt with. And although proactive maintenance feels sometimes difficult because you're putting out expenses in order to prevent something from happening, and when we're preventing something from happening, we don't actually ever feel the pain of it happening. So, but I think the flip side is that when something does break down or wear down in this case, the cost can be significantly higher. So again, taking a much more proactive approach to your maintenance on all your manure equipment becomes, I think, critical in that whole situation. Denis, do you have any thoughts from that side of things with the cows?
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. Taking that proactive approach, and this is something that's part of my role as well. Especially when somebody is either going to sand, going into a new barn with robots and sand, and was never in a sand bedding type. This is something that I try to coach, teach, or however we want to say it, but during startup and after startup to teach those day-to-day activities, to do a proper maintenance on the robots, to limit the wear and tear, and also prevent unnecessary alarms or breakdowns or anything that would prevent the robot from whatever we bought it for. Right, so this is really part of my job, and it's part of the farm management department to show our customers and robot dairy farmers how to optimize that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, go ahead. Great. Yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't mind talking to that a little bit here. I think you guys covered, pretty good. One thing I would caution people or advise people to think about is think about the day. We saw the modular oil bath on the what was James Way, now Valmetal pumps. That's something with bearings in it and seals, and it will need to be changed eventually. And if you think about what does that day look like, well, if you change it preemptively, one could argue that you had more life left in that oil bath, and maybe that could be the case. However, if you're changing it on a planned basis, chances are you're going to be prepared. You're going to do this during reasonable hours, not after hours on a holiday. And it's going to be a much more enjoyable experience. And often doing things in a planned manner is going to, in the end, be cost equivalent or more cost effective. Meanwhile, be a way more enjoyable experience for the people who work on the farm. And I think more importantly, for the cows, they never have to experience, a dirty burn for a few days because you're trying to deal with an oil bath that has destructed itself. If you get in there and change the seals out in a preventative manner, you can often avoid larger scale damage to, let's say, the bearings.
Right on. Sort of along the lines of sand, guys, I think let's talk a little bit about the climate in British Columbia. I think sand is used all throughout Canada. However, in the British Columbia climate, it does seem to be very effective. Gray, do you want to talk to us a little bit about why we think it works well in British Columbia, and particularly in the Fraser Valley?
Yeah, totally. One of the great things we have is, maybe we have 1 or 2 weeks of really sub-zero weather where we have to worry about something like a sand lane freezing. Aside from that, the other 50 weeks, we're good to go, and our lane can operate, as normal, and we can recover bedding. Another huge advantage, as Ralph mentioned, we're trying to keep the fluid going to the flume as liquidy as possible. So we're often adding water to our reception pit to aid in that. And when you get 5 or 6 feet of rainwater over the course of a winter, it certainly makes it so you have a convenient place in the form of your long-term storage, if you have an uncovered storage, to get water back into your manure system without adding any water that wasn't there already. So these are two huge advantages, and I think that's one of the reasons sand is so prevalent here in British Columbia.
So, Gray, farms that are recovering sand, when the sand is out to dry, do we typically see a cover over top of the reclaimed sand, or are we seeing a roof of some kind, or are we leaving it open to the elements?
We're definitely seeing an evolution of the sand lanes, so I can give you an answer, and maybe my opinion on that will change in a year or so. But the way I've seen it, based on, the 5 years or so that we've had sand lanes around, is it's not super important to cover that sand. That sand is going to spend a month or two from the time it comes out of the sand lane until the time it goes back into the barn. And during that amount of time, it's going to be amalgamated from the pile from one clean out, amalgamated with other piles, get higher. Higher is drier in terms of sand storage. And sometimes the rainwater washing our pile, isn't a bad thing at all. So in my experience, it's not critical to cover the sand. However, I do see people wanting to do that, especially with their sand that's clean and ready to go back into the barn, and I don't see a problem with that at all.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm going to kind of pass this one a little bit over to Denis here. This is kind of an obvious question, but I think it deserves to be asked. Obviously, wet sand is equally as bad as wet sawdust. Would we be correct in saying that?
It's not great. Obviously, you want your bedding to be as dry as possible, no matter what type of bedding you're using. This always limits the spread of bacteria or pathogens or mastitis within your bed surface. So yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily as bad. Definitely, wet shavings is probably a better conducer of those bacteria and pathogens. So, but same thing, the same principle applies. You for sure want it to ideally be as dry as possible. Ideally, 95% dry matter is kind of your goal or your aim for putting sand back into your barn.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I know a lot of farms around the valley and around British Columbia have different methods of raising their young stock. I'm going to kind of push this question over to Denis. Do you think it's important for farms that are raising their own young stock to have the same type of bedding in heifer space that they would in a milk cow barn? Now, obviously, you're going to have young stock on a pack for a period of time, but once they reach the age of getting in a stall, should a young cow be on mats, both in that heifer barn or heifer space as well as in the milk cow barn, or do you see a problem with there being variance in any of that?
I think the biggest issue with having a variance in different bedding types that you might put in either young stock versus milking cows or dry cows, it's mostly in terms of your day-to-day practice and day-to-day practice and the cow comfort, the animal comfort. I think that a lot of times the young stock and heifers or pre-milking heifers are regarded as like the side business, and we don't necessarily pay a whole lot of attention. We kind of walk through the barn pretty quickly and either don't bed as well or don't invest as much money in the bedding type. But I do believe that I think if we're going to go with, say, DCC water beds in the dairy barn, it's probably a good idea to maybe put it, maybe not necessarily before like breeding age, but after breeding age, invest in that comfort so that those heifers don't come in with hock sores or injured knees or injured, any types of leg injury once they first calve. So I think that money is going to be beneficial for first lactation and on after. So I think, keeping that management practice the same throughout the barn is going to be helpful and is going to be beneficial for those cows later on.
Yeah, I think, I think one of the overall themes here that we've kind of talked about today is really just about the consistency in our management practices,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
So we talk about this in regards to the milking robot all the time. That the cows love consistency. They don't love change, but they certainly really appreciate consistency. And as long as it's the same, you will see benefits or less stress related to the move into a milk cow barn or
Yeah.
with other early lactation cows, right? So,
Definitely.
I totally agree. But again, it kind of comes down to that central theme that we have at West Coast Robotics, where and at Lately as well, we believe wholeheartedly in making the milking experience or the space in the barn. Gray, what's that saying that you say, that we just visit the barn, but the cows live there? And so it's their home, and it should be as comfortable as it could possibly be for them. So again, just consistency in everything that's being done, from management practices to how the cow's being milked to the stalls that they're living in throughout their life cycle, I think is really critical in success. We're going to kind of start to wrap up here a little bit, so I'm going to put everybody on the spot. We'll start with Denis, and then we'll go to Gray, and then I'll share my thoughts. Denis, if you were starting up a farm today and you had the freedom and flexibility to do whatever you wanted to do, what would you do for stall bedding?
It's a good question. I'm probably gonna go with the unpopular answer here, but I'm gonna answer it solely based on my side of my work, and what I've always done is always think about the cow first. And maybe when I come to that point, I would choose something else. But if I'm thinking cow first, I'm always thinking, what would she do naturally? And the most natural, basically, way to house a cow would be, to me, on a bedded pack. And I would have, again, as we mentioned in the different segments throughout the day, I would adapt my management to that. It's probably not the best choice for West Coast Robotics, but but yeah, like I said, I'm only saying this in terms of cow health, and I'm thinking about the cow solely. So that would be my answer.
What about you, Gray? What do you think?
I think it would be nice to just have a robot, as long as it was summer, sitting in a field and not even a barn, which probably sounds ironic coming from someone who has been involved with the design and sale of many barns. But realistically, I would probably choose sand for me personally. But you need to keep in mind that that's going to align with my values. I'm sure during parts of Ralph's presentation, when he's explaining oil seals and pump curves and all that, a lot of people are thinking, geez, this is kind of boring. But for me, I kind of geek out on that stuff a bit, and I would enjoy having that equipment around. I enjoy the challenge of trying to design a system to do what many people find difficult, recover sand and do it in a low maintenance way. And that's what I would like to see in my barn for traction reasons. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah,
and yourself, Mitch, though, I'd be careful.
Yeah.
And you're, what are you, 1 year into
I'm
it?
1 year in, yeah.
And what would
I
you
think,
do?
honestly, for me, I would probably go with water beds. I think from a cow health perspective, I really see the benefits in the product. From an economical perspective, I really see the benefit in minimizing a disposable product. I think it makes the function or the ecosystem that is the barn more efficient. I also think that from a lifestyle perspective, when you have a bedding situation like water beds, you're going to be cleaning stalls less, and you're going to be bedding stalls less. And for me, that's something that I think would be important to my management styles. So that's probably where that's probably the direction I would go. And I'm sure people that I've had discussion with this about would probably say, yeah, I've leaned that way in that discussion with others. So, but again, I wouldn't push anything on anybody, because as we've clearly established today, everyone's management style is completely different.
Exactly.
So
it's got to be adapted to that management style.
Exactly. Right. And so generally, in most deals that we work on, guys come to the table with a pretty good idea of what they want to do and what's important to them. And I think that really, is key in making good decisions. Is what are your values? What is important to you? And when I ask that question, I think that's really what I wanted to get out of that there's no right or wrong answer
Yeah,
when it
totally.
comes to betting.
100%.
That you know, we're all three guys standing here. We all have a varying opinion for various reasons. So I think it's important to recognize that.
Yeah, and I would also say, you know, you got to work with what you have as well. You know, if you inherited a burn that was a challenge, let's say you have very little power around, and it's going to be difficult to recover sand because you can't get those big horsepower flumes. You could do a sawdust bedded burn. Something like water beds would be probably my preference in that situation. And you could have a really simple burn cleaner into a pit system, very low maintenance, and that could work very well. So it's also about maximizing, you know, leveraging what you have to work with. I would say is pretty important too.
Yeah, to go along with that, I'd say managing working with what you have to work with. For me, you know, I said what I would choose, but at the same time, I think really when it comes down to it, I would probably go with what kind of expertise do I have around me, right? So if I have somebody like Gray that's got a lot of experience with the manure reclamation, or you know, what do I have around me? What do I have as support, and what do I have as expertise to support me in my decision and in the management that I want to do for my farm? This in the end, that's probably what would make my decision in terms of what bedding type I would go with, right?
Yeah. Well, right on, guys.
All right.
Great discussion. I guess we'll kick it back over to Gray here to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So first of all, congratulations. If you're still watching now, then that means you made it to the end. Our team at West Coast Robotics thanks you for your interest. And obviously a factor like bedding has a huge impact on the cows who live on your farm. There are more pros and cons to each bedding type than we could cover in any online event. You know, deep bedded sawdust, mattresses, water beds, sand bedding. There's a lot of options, you know, but really what the overwhelming message we want to get across is whichever bedding option you choose, there's no one size fits all solution. There is, however, an optimum way to house the bedding under the cows and deal with it once it finds its way into the alley. So using the experience gleaned from our many projects, we are happy to provide a tailored solution to your farm. If you're looking to change your stabling setup or your manure system to better handle your chosen bedding type, or you're contemplating a change, we encourage you to reach out to West Coast Robotics or bring it up the next time we stop by your farm for a visit. We will not tell you what you should do, but we will let you know the different options and how they will impact the management of your farm and the health of your cows. So whichever decision you arrive at, it will be an informed one. You know, I'd like to just bring up before we go here that we have the links below if you want to see any of the resources referred to in this event. We've got our viewer poll that we're really hoping you have time to reply to, so we can see a little bit what's on your mind. And also, I'd like to remind everybody that the presentation from Ralph at Valmetal was an abridged version for the sake of brevity. So on the YouTube channel, you'll find a full 41-minute presentation which goes in depth into alley scrapers, your choices there with different blades and different cables and chains. It talks about transferring manure as a semi-solid with no recovery as that pertains to sand. And it's really just a great resource on the principles that we use at West Coast Robotics, which we've inherited from Valmetal, for how we pick the right way to size a manure system. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for their time and say bye.